Hello, I am Joshua Bezek, and this is my presentation about medieval transport. Right. So, my research question is what was medieval transport like during the Middle Ages? And here is my project about it. So, you can see there's five uh, parts that I have cut it to, and I will go over them now in counterclockwise fashion. Right. So we can just do it like this. So the first part we'll be going over will be cargo. So the cargo they had in the medieval ages. So they actually measured cargo in tons, as you can see here in the top left, if you can see my mouse over here. And tons were like wooden barrels, and they put many materials into it, for example wine, salt and more. And that's how they measured how much cargo they were bringing with them. There were other measurements for the tons. There was the ton, then half of a ton would be called a pipe or a butt. That would be a smaller barrel. Then there was the punchen and the tertian. That would be 1/3 of a ton. Hogshead. That would be 1/4 of a ton. A tierce. That would be 1/6 of a ton. A barrel. That would be 1/8 of a ton. And a rundlet. That would be 1/14 of a ton. These are the measurements that I found. There's the materials they were transporting. I didn't include the long distance materials, only the ones they brought from town to town and traded along. So here, these three sub branches, I have the three most transported materials. So I actually have a longer list. I did include it into the paper, but the first one, the most transported, would be agricultural products at a 25%. Then it would be wool and wine at 16%, fish, timber, stone in 8.5%, lead at 5%, coal at 4%, turfs, livestock, lime, and metals would be at 2%, and salt at 1.5%. So those are the cargoes that I found. And yeah, so we can go to our next branch, which would be rivers. Rivers actually were incredibly useful. They were very exaggerated on the maps. Like, if you have a map today, you can see the roads, they're huge. So that was the same with the maps. They had really bold, big rivers drawn onto them. Uh, they were bigger than they actually were. On these rivers, there were actually little boat drawings, and these boats would most likely show if it was navigable. It would show if you could go there with a ship, or if it's too shallow or too small. It even sometimes shown if you could bring a big ship there, or if this was only for a small ship. So it would also say if you could, what size of ship would fit there. Also useful with rivers is that many people lived close to a river, so most of the land, at least in England, was most of it was in a 25 kilometers close. That was maybe a day's walk. And most cities were located at rivers, so nearly everyone lived really close to a river, at least a day of walking. Rivers were also very good at avoiding hills. People with horses would struggle by having to going up hills, down hills, or avoid going around hills, but rivers automatically just avoided hills. It would go around hills. The river doesn't go up a hill and then down a hill, then up a hill and down a hill. So the boats wouldn't have to struggle as much as a horse would has to go up a hill. And the waters for the river wasn't really that there wasn't a big current, so you could also go upstream with the boats as well downstream. So you could go both ways. Anyways, there were also city taxes for boats. That if a boat would go through a city, it would have to pay a tax. This was based on how much cargo it had. If it had this much, it'd pay this much, and if it had this much, it'd have to pay this much. And sometimes the cities even took the cargo, like took a part of it as their own. Next we'll move to boats. Whoops. There's boats. You can see here a tiny drawing I actually drew of a boat. You can even see the tons inside. So there were size differences between boats, as I said back at the maps. And yeah, some rivers were navigable for bigger boats and some were only for smaller boats. But there were also one-way boats. Like if you can see this boat I drew here, it's actually quite squarish. That's because it was a one-way boat. They'd build it, go up or down the river, and then break it. They'd either burn it for fire or sell it. That's actually why they were quite square, because it was easier to sell straight wood than curved wood. And you can see here it was a giant one. It even had houses on it. The one above were the one-way boats. Anyways, that's all about the boats that I have. So let's move to carts and wagons. So, carts and wagons. They actually either had 2 or 4 wheels. That depended if it was a cart or a wagon. So carts had 2 wheels, wagons had 4. I know. So you can see here's a cart, a wagon, and here's a cart. And carts actually had only one job. You could change the job, what it carried, but it wasn't usual. So if you put grain in it, it would carry grain for the rest of its life. If you put horse poop in it, it would only carry horse poop. If you carried only fish in it, it would only carry fish for the rest of its life. That's the way it usually was. Anyways, horses that actually pulled the carts and wagons, they're actually like cars. There were rich horses and poor horses. It's like a very expensive car and a car that didn't cost much. So some were better, faster, stronger, and some were just weaker and worse. They were more sick. Anyways, actually the average speed would be for a cart or wagon 24 to 48 kilometers per day, but some people went faster. Oh shoot, that's 10 minutes. Well, I don't have much to say left. We only have coaches, which isn't a lot. So coaches would be for the super rich. There weren't a lot of coaches, at least in England, and they're expensive, but on top of that they were expensive to maintain because they weren't really too durable. Uh, they were just, their fixes were expensive for it, and as you can see, here's a coach. It looks similar to the wagon I drew, but it had windows as well. It was you could say it was like a limousine, but more rare and for more the super rich people. As a limousine you can rent anywhere. But yeah, I think I'll finish it here. Those are all the points. Whoops. And that was my project, and that was all I wanted. That's all. So, thank you for listening, and I hope that answers your question. And goodbye. Also, I forgot to add that these are my sources. Can have a look here.